Hey guys, Infinity here, back at you with another video. Today we're going to be dropping our first analysis piece on the channel. I asked you guys on Twitter what you wanted to see, and the resounding answer was OUG's Takeoff control versus Q9 and Wolves. Now, a bit of context for you guys at home, if you didn't know, OUG are very good at Takeoff control. They were undefeated on it until CDM Stage 3, and they even beat Q9 in Stage 2. Now, in Stage 3, of course, they didn't just lose it once versus Wolves, they would then go on to lose against Q9. And so I thought I'd take the time to explain what changed. How did they go from being one of the best teams on Takeoff control in CDM to losing it twice against two teams that ended up outplacing them in the final stage of competition? Now, a small disclaimer here before we get into the video itself. I've never done one of these before, so I have no idea how it's going to go, and I'm looking for feedback for future analyst pieces. So let me know what you want in the comment section below, including maybe some matches you'd like me to take a look at. Without any further ado then, let's jump straight into the video by talking about the first of two maps we're going to be taking a look at today. Let's talk about OUG versus Q9 in CDM Stage 2. Alright, so let's talk about the first of the three matches I mentioned then. This is OUG versus Q9's Takeoff control back in CDM Stage 2. Now, this is the first time I've used this program. I have no idea what I'm doing, so let's figure it out as we go along here. Alright, so jumping straight into the match then, the first thing I'm going to point out is the break-off coming out from OUG. Now, it's worth saying that this actually doesn't work at first, but this is a consistent thing regardless that OUG do even later on in their matches versus Q9 and Wolves. And I'll show you exactly what it is. So if I get the pen, you can see here that Kings and Cartels, these two players, pretty much consistently end up here every single time. That is an awful arrow, but you guys get the point. Every single time that they break off, they go straight through red, all the way through to this position here, this little cubby, where they can watch for a control tower. Now, the thing is for Q9, the reason they win this break off is effectively because they are in a 3 versus 2 here. You're going to lose that more often than not unless some player makes some insane 2-piece or even a 3-piece. That's probably not going to happen. And that doesn't happen at first here. So Q9 actually win these opening breakoffs. The rest of the team are kind of focused on getting mid-map and a little bit of launch center control. But in terms of actually getting control of this side of the map, this whole thing is something that OUG do pretty consistently on Takeoff control, and it is a key reason why they actually win this map, is ensuring they have control of red and control tower. But in this instance, none of that works. It completely just falls apart off the start, and that's okay because OUG do react properly. So let's take a look at it. So you can see off the start here, solo opening gunfights, 1 versus 2, does actually win those fights, so all of a sudden you get launch center control. But in terms of the fights that are important for OUG, well, they actually lose them around the control tower, and Oling plays his life perfectly. So at this point, OUG's kind of only reaction is to try and push through the launch center, the map control that they do have, which is another thing that OUG do very well, is when they don't maybe get what they want, they kind of flip the map and go in a different direction just to make sure they do have some model of map control, which is again what you're seeing here. You have launch center control, you don't have control tower, you don't have red, you don't have a lot of red, but you do have players push forward, and that's something that Q9 need to consistently deal with. So as we move forward here, if I just get rid of that, you're going to see again a lot of the gunfights going down. Big 2-piece there. Q9 do manage to clear one out, and they are going to continue to make sure that they get this area. Finally taken out solo. But the thing, again, that OUG do, and you're going to see it here once again, is that they continue to push through red and make sure, again, awful arrow, make sure that these players do not get past this 50-yard line. Because if they do, if they lose red control, then it forces them to kind of funnel through to the launch tower. God, these arrows, man. I'm awful with arrows. Anyway, with that said, that's basically what happens here in round number 1. OUG continue to flood reinforcements through red over and over again. They continue to win the trades over and over again. And it kind of ends out here as we kind of fast forward through round number 1 to a situation where the life discrepancy becomes just a little bit too much for Q9 to handle. Now, Q9, they do get a few players through, trying to make some solo plays in this round. But ultimately, OUG have a pretty dominant defense. And it is mostly just down to the fact that they are constantly filling space where Q9 aren't. And they are constantly getting aggressive. And of course, late round, something that you're going to see here from OUG quite a bit is that they do get control of the control tower. This one position is everything for OUG, and when they don't get it, it can be a bit of a struggle. All right, so let's move on then. I think seeing this, just seeing the life discrepancy, you know that OUG are going to win this round, and they do. So moving on from round number 1, let's see how OUG handle their first defense. Now, this is an important, or offense, excuse me. This is an important thing. Tech with overclock, this is something that a lot of people have talked about recently. You have these perks. Overclock is a perk that basically enables Tech to get control of a war machine at the start of pretty much every single round of control. Obviously, bar the first one where you need to charge through it, and that's very important. Now, here on offense, he uses it pretty consistently to try and get control of this area here. Constantly sends it. You're also seeing nades and utility. Basically, just ensures that there's not going to be anybody coming through the middle of the map off the start of these rounds. And you're going to see that here. So that's where he's firing at. And he immediately picks off a player, Curly, at the start of the round. That forces the other Q9 players here, if I go to yellow for a sec, to push through and around the mid-map. Because they don't have any mid-map control right now. And forcing without getting kills would be kind of silly to do. So that's what they're going to do here straight into the next round. And you're going to see that again. Opening gunfights here for a Q9. Nice double snipe coming out of D-Gen. Gives them a fair bit of control. But either way, nobody in mid-map right now, and they are just continuing a fight for a control tower. Okay, and as for the rest of the round then, well, this is pretty much just trades after trades for the remainder of the round. There's a couple of key sequences of events that happen in round number 2 that kind of indicate both what OUG and Q9 are doing in this matchup. First and foremost, there's this. So OUG basically trying to send players individually up, the first of which is going to be Tectonic here. If I just go to blue, you can see Tech here. He's player number 1. You're also going to be looking at Raph taking a route through here with the equalizers. He's got it ready to go. And these are 2 key players that they send up the map to try and get something going. Unfortunately, both of these don't work in the moment. Tech immediately dies. Raph then follows up and dies off the equals as well. No value whatsoever. So the next thing that OUG are now going to do, you don't have any map control through the middle of the map whatsoever, is they're going to try and get some kind of control through red. This is a consistent thing that OUG do very damn well. They always get red control, and it's what gives them the dub in a lot of these rounds. And so the idea is, well, Raf's invested, hasn't really got anything. We now need to invest to try and kind of counter that in a way to compensate for the fact we've just lost a player. So you're going to see both Kings and Cartels shoot through to red to try and get some map control. Now, unfortunately, as you'll see here, doesn't really work. The kills themselves from Kings and Cartels are great. Unfortunately, coming off the spawn, D-Chen makes a huge play. You're about to see it here. Gets a double snipe, immediately clears out red. And that basically paves the way for Q9 to push back through the middle of the map. And there it is. That double snipe gives them those red spawns. But that's why red control is so important. Because if you don't get red control, players are going to spawn in there and they're going to spawn closer to A. So from this point on in the round, things look okay for AUG, right? You've got some mid-map presence. But it gets worse because Oling does some silly things. He not only gets kills through the top of red, you're going to see them there, he actually starts to get kills through the Tempest as well. So here's the wrap from Oling, straight in towards red. Couple of crucial gunfights. Yep, easy peasy for him. But he doesn't stop there. So as soon as he gets those kills through red, Oling decides, okay, cool, I've got the kills through red. I know that these guys are still going to be coming from here, and that's the biggest issue. So let's just try and take some mid-map pressure to not necessarily close this round, but at the very least, we are going to be trying to take it in our favor. So let's have a look at that. Again, you can see the little route that he takes here. Straight from the middle of the map, finds a couple of kills. Also kind of helps that you've got Mauchi in launch center control. Those 2 kills, though, don't necessarily solidify the round, but it takes away a lot of space that OUG otherwise would normally get to work with. Now, OUG do continue to kind of push forward here towards the end of the round, but if we just flick to the end of the round, effectively, it does come down to, I believe it is a 2v1, I want to say. Yeah, and there's not really much that Tectonic can do. He kind of gets pinched by the last couple of players. So that's the only round that Q9 win, and the reason they do win it is because OUG aren't really that successful at taking red control on the offense. However, as we get into the next round, this is where things become a little bit different because Tech now has a war machine off the start. Alright, so let's start talking then about the beginning of the next round. Now, this is where Tech, once again, has his war machine due to overclock at the beginning of every single round. But this is the first time in the match that he has it on the defense. Now, on the offense, Tech was trying to get control of this area of the minimap which is going to give him full mid-map control because the rest of Q9 were funneling through red or through B. Now, that doesn't happen here, of course, because now they're on the defense. And on defense, the idea with the War Machine is a little bit different. The area that he's going to be targeting is here. Now, what this does is it effectively shuts off the entirety of Control Tower, making it significantly easier compared to what you saw in round number 1 for Kings and Cartels to wrap through to Control Tower and get full control over the 2 power positions that OUG do so well with, which is red and Control Tower. And you're going to see that play out here. So here it is. Tech War Machine out, straight down the middle of the map, and he already picks off 1. Now, the fact that they don't have trophies set up here, keep that in mind for later on, means that, again, this entire area of the map is completely unavailable to Q9. They cannot go through, and so they are instead forced to funnel into the launch center. Now, let's check out what happens after this then. So that start is very important, and it's something that Tech does pretty consistently to great success on this map. Now, I love this reposition as well coming out from Tech, because Tech is really close to not having any of his War Machine left. You can kind of see that here, that there is like no War Machine left, but he still has a little bit, and he kind of just like, yep, I'm just going to full send it, pre-fires it into the launch center gate, and gets a freebie. Insane play. Also, there is Solo. Solo picks up 1, makes the second weak. Raf and Tech should be good to try and pick those kills up. And yeah, there is that communication. Now, the other thing that's happened while all this is going on off the start, if I go back just a little bit here, is again the fact that we talked about Kings and Cartels having control of the Control Tower. Now, they kind of don't just sit here and do nothing, because there's no real point in doing so. While Solo, Tech, and Raf are getting control of the launch center, well, they actually make a move a little bit further in to be a proper nuisance. Now, they need to keep it because of the spawns, but they can at the very least be domineering, and that's where you're seeing this wrap start to come through here, basically pushing as far deep as they do. And you're seeing, I think, even Cartels move back just a little bit to make sure that they don't mess the spawns up too much, is forcing this spawn continually for Q9, where they're only allowed to spawn here. Now, the Takeoff control spawns were altered relatively recently, so that you don't just basically continually spawn here. You can't get spawn trapped in the way that you used to. But Q9's really only hope is to try and kill Kings or get through launch center, which is very difficult to do at this point, and it's almost impossible for them to do so. This round of control, even if Q9 eventually do get out, is one of the most dominant rounds of control, and pretty much a perfect way for OUG to play their strategies. More perfect than we've maybe necessarily seen in the past off the rip. That like 2 to 3 minutes of play is exactly how OUG wanted to play their defenses, and it's a big reason why they're able to so successfully do so against Q9 on this map. So from this point on in the round then, Q9, they do have somewhat of a fight back through them. Eventually, they manage to get through the launch center control. So we're just going to speed through here a little bit and into some of the kills that they're making. You can see they do manage to get through towards B. Nice double coming through there. Gives Q9 a little bit of control. But in the moment, basically, although OUG do get most of the kills, one player stays behind here from Q9. And props to them for kind of making this play cool. 100% this would have been the comm. Like Curly, he gets through. And I don't think OUG are fully aware of it. They certainly do try to retake B control. But Curly is a bit of a nuisance here. And he actually has an op ready to go as well. Curly picks up the kill against Solo. And that means that B isn't fully cleared. He keeps this round alive for Q9. Now, off the back of this play, obviously, as I already said, Q9, they have a lot of utility ready to go. They have all 5 ops to go if they want to. That's the largest circle I've ever drawn. If they so desire it, they have all 5 ops. And, well, it's time to invest some of those ops. So let's talk about it. So almost immediately, you're going to see the Ani coming out to play, followed up by the Tempest, the double investment from Q9. And they look to push up the map just a little bit. They find a fair bit of value out of this. And the idea is to just be as hectic as possible, try and close down the life deficit. You can see a couple of kills coming through there from the Claw. That's Curly now in the backline, being a proper nuisance. Q9, off the back of this heavy investment, though, still unable to win. And the reason is this play right here. So Q9 still plays through, still kind of have to be dealt with, and they are continuing to be a nuisance. Eventually, Q9 do lose Curly, and so eventually they kind of have to come back. But there's a little route being run here by Raf off the spawn. So Raf spawns up in red. Now, it's very easy for a player like Raf to kind of come back here and try and help out the players off the spawn. It's very easy to make that decision that you want to come back and help your players out, but he trusts his teammates that they are going to get that done. Instead, what Raf does is he wraps all the way through to a position that he knows, due to King still being there, nobody from Q9 is home. And this little wrap that Raf takes effectively ends the round a little bit later on. Now, obviously, if Q9 kept the players alive in B, this would not be anywhere near as easy. And also, it's worth saying Q9 is technically speaking wise to it. But Raf, with this flanking play, sits here for a second while the rest of the team, again, chooses to push through. And then he decides to activate by making a flank behind enemy lines that they never see coming. So here we go again. Cartels turns the attention of that one player through the middle of the map in Mao Chi. Raf still on this flank, by the way, while all these trades are going down. So you're in an 8v5, and then here comes Raf to basically close the round out. Eventually, he gets to this point, comes behind, whips out the claw for the final kill, and it leaves the last 3 players alive. Raf finding that kill is just basically everything. He gives them information on that flank, he gives them that kill, and then, of course, comes down to a 1v6 for T-Chen. He can't get it done. Alright, so for the start of round number 4 then, it is OUG back on the offense once again, and D-Chen tries to do exactly what Tech did to them in the previous round. Unfortunately for him, he gets kind of unlucky here. He actually hits the mid-globe. He doesn't even hit a trophy system or anything like that. He just whiffs his shot. Tech can't do the same thing he did previously, which is to kill anybody through the middle of the map. It would be D-Chen, of course, because of the fact that there is a trophy system there. I should put that in yellow. There is a trophy system here for Q9. So can't be as effective as before. He quite almost immediately finds that out and switches gears to try and get control of launch sensor. Now, we're also seeing a heavy investment here from OUG at the start of this round. You're seeing the Annihilator, the DM coming out from solo, and all of this is just to try and get OUG another offensive round early on, because if you do heavy invest early into a round, you get like a 7 to 8, maybe even a 10 life advantage. Well, you're more likely than not going to win that round. So with that said, let's see how some of these go. Now, unfortunately for OUG, Solo's DM early on here doesn't really amount to that much. He dies as part of a 2-piece by Sun. Now, the good news for Q9, even though you lose that kill, is that Tech almost immediately responds. He knows exactly where Sun is and gets the kill with the War Machine. One of the last bullets he actually fires in this round with the War Machine, he immediately gets it. Now, the next thing that Tech does that's very important here is he gets that kill onto Sun. Again, do not mean to use that color. He gets the kill onto Sun, and then he almost immediately wraps back around through towards A to try and recapture the point. So you're going to see him kill by Sun, and then you're going to see him make the wrap through towards A, and Tech follows up. He's only able to do that, by the way, as well, because Kings is around here. The fact that Kings has this position, has the entirety of Control Tower. Nobody from Q9 really can do anything at this point because they don't have any launch center control, but to funnel through the middle of the map. And both Tech and Kings know it. So Kings is able to find an immediate kill here through the middle of the map. And it creates a lot of space. Tech now back on towards the point, gets up 1. And this is a big play for Tech because he not only finds that 1 kill, but also takes 2 down with a Type 63 through the middle of the map. Now, while that's going on, OUG do something that they do pretty consistently, which is, again, it's that same consistent thing of, okay, we're going to try and get through. Again, not that color. Guys, count how many times I mess up with the color in this video. We're going to once again try to push through to red via either the front door or via the side door, because we know how important getting red control is to having control over the middle of the map. And in this instance, it works out quite well. Q9 doesn't really have much of a response. So you can see here, initial kill coming through. Big 2-piece from Solo, and that is now red control that they wanted. Meanwhile, OUG, and this is something else I want to talk about, this is something that generally speaking works very well for OUG, and it's a big reason why they were successful against other teams on this map in Stage 1 and Stage 2, is that they pretty consistently jump on A before they even really have map control. Like, at this point, when Tech jumped on the point, he had to earn those 3 kills, and he had to try and get some red control via his teammates. Neither of those things that happened when he jumped on the point, and that's something that OUG do very well, is they consistently jump on the objective first before getting map control, and that applies a lot of pressure to the opposition. So we're seeing that through that round. Q9, they respond by trying to get launch center control, and to be fair, for the most part, they do so. Alright, so jumping later on into the round then, this is after Q9 have already lost some lives, A is gone, and now you're looking at OUG here, trying to fight back and trying to get some modicum of control through the launch center, and of course, trying to regain some control over red. Now, one player has already gotten through here in this instance, and that player is going to be Kings. Kings is pivotal to this entire play and allows them to win this round later on, alongside some great op decisions that we'll talk about here in just a moment. So, jumping into it, Kings, little flanking play. He's currently up top on the balcony, and he makes the perfect play through. Bit of Call of Duty timing here, I will say, into actually making this play happen, effectively flanking all the way behind. Now, it's worth saying, even though in the moment, actually, I didn't really understand fully how the spawns worked at the time. I said in the moment that they didn't know that Kings is through here. They absolutely knew that Kings was through here because of the fact that they did end up getting this red spawn. So you'll see that here. Kings pushing out forces Q9 to spawn into red. And that actually makes it a little bit easier on OUG to push through as these 3 kills from OUG come through. So you can see King spawns in, and then all of those players spawn up around red. They're like, okay, we know that somebody has gotten through. We need to almost immediately deal with them. The problem is for Q9 is they've only got one player even close to the point, and that is going to be Oling. You're already 3 lives down in this instant, so you kind of have to be pretty much perfect. Oling can't throw his life away. Now, the Hunter Killer drone immediately goes out, immediately tries to get on towards Oling, and Oling does make a flanking play for just 1 kill, but that is a huge shutdown coming through to take him out of the play. You take a trade in that instant, but Oling only getting a couple of kills with the Tempest is everything. But that's not the only operator that goes kind of all right for Q9 here in the moment, because arguably the most powerful operator in the game right now is the Death Machine, and Sun immediately pulls it to try and do something. Unfortunately for him, he gets killed by Kings, who, once again, they just didn't know he was in that position. Still didn't know, by the way. They had no idea that Kings was this far forward. They checked this back building, and he just totally takes them by surprise, sitting in this corner, plays his life to perfection. Arguably one of the most important kills, if not the most important kill of the round. Takes him down, brings it down to an 8 versus 4. Now, eventually this goes down to a 5 versus 3. And OUG make a split-second decision towards the end of this round, and it's something that benefits them so much towards the end of the rounds generally here versus Q9, which is, look, we've got a couple of operators, let's just use them to try and secure another offense and basically secure us this map. That's exactly what happens here. OUG, Tech, and Raf just pull their ops out. I don't think it's Tech and Raf, I think it's just, yeah, it's Raf and Cartels, excuse me. Double op coming out, which is normally a bit of an egregious thing to do when you have life numbers, but I just think they wanted to try and win the round. That's exactly what they did. Now just Oling, the last one left alive, and winning a 1 versus 5 with no operator is highly unlikely, especially when you're being peppered up by a couple of different angles. Now, minute thing that OUG do here is actually really funny. They don't immediately go for the kill against Oling. They want to try and win the round via ticks if they can to guarantee a defense in round number 5. It's a very smart thing to do. There's no reason to egregiously look for a kill. Nobody was really on streaks at that point. Just try to get the round, and that's exactly what they do. So Kings will play that towards the end, that flanking play and shutting down Sun with them not knowing exactly where he was positioned. It really did catch Q9 off guard, and of course that double up investment from OUG also manages to close out that round. Alright, so into the start of the next round then, we go back to, again, OUG on the defense, and it's the exact same strategy that you saw from a couple of rounds ago, where Tech immediately whips out his War Machine to, again, I hate these arrows, to try to take control of Control Tower. Now, it's worth saying that this time it's not actually as effective. He only finds 1 kill, but once again, the OUG setup is that Kings and Cartels are there as a safety net to try to take down any stragglers that do manage to get through. And for the most part, that is exactly what happens. So let's check out the strategy once again. And again, this is important because it's something that Q9 and Wolves will later adapt to when you go into their games. So you can see, Kings Tech finds one, Kings and Cartels there to try and get the follow-up. Now, from this point on, they have a lot of map control. It's worth saying that there's going to be a bit of a fight here. So let's jump forward later into the round after Q9 do push up the map and OUG eventually retake it to when we get to about a 10 versus 10. Alright, so tell a lie, we're going a little bit earlier than the 10v10 because there is another flanking play that happens here. Now, this is something that Q9 do kind of badly here in this control. It's actually an error for them as opposed to something that OUG do well, even though it is technically something that OUG does that blows up these offensive efforts. So, in this moment, you can see that Q9 have a lot of control. Like, they have full red control. You've got a couple of players up top on Scaffold and top launch center. Obviously, you basically have this entire northern side of the map to yourselves. There's only really ever a couple of players that you contend with. Unfortunately, though, Q9 don't really, despite having some presence around there, hold top control or launch center control properly. And you'll see that here pretty continually. So despite having a small man advantage and despite having players on the point, they're never able to capture A effectively because they don't fully clear out their lane. So here's the first of two flanks coming through. Now, it's worth saying this flank happens at the same time as Q9 losing a couple of players around the front line. But still, the flank is really what blows it up. So you can see the little kind of route that Raf has taken here. If I just go to blue, you can see that, you know, off the spawn, he's gone all the way around behind enemy lines and effectively ends up taking the one player on the objective down, which is going to turn the heads of the rest of the players for Q9 at the same time as them having to face other players. So Cartels takes one down through the launch center. Next up, Oling down through the middle of the cut. And finally, Raf makes his position known for the first. Now, you're starting to, again, kind of lose time in this round. Q9, though, they still do have some players pushed through here. It's just, unfortunately, they kind of go a little bit one by one, trying to make the hero plays, and albeit D-Chen does exactly that, what they don't do is they do not check for this area here. Once again, they think they have launch center control because they've got control of the corridor and they have control of scaffolding. They actually do not check whatsoever for the exact same flank coming on through. And unfortunately for them, this time it's Kings to blow the exact same play up. So Q9, they've got players pushed forward. Kings comes through, and he actually goes a little bit further than Raf this time around. So you can see he's already made that first kill. He's picked up one in the middle of the map. That's the A stopped just before the extra 60 seconds gets added. And he goes a little bit further. This time, unlike Raf, who died almost immediately, he chooses to push through to the control tower. So you can see it here. He gets this one kill, decides, all right, cool, I'm going to get control tower control, because this is the biggest issue so far, is that every single time what's happened is these guys have gotten through towards red by getting control of the northern side of the map. So if we stop them off kind of here, if we stop them even getting through, well, then we'll be fine. And that's the idea here for Kings on this flanking play. So, first and foremost, Kings going to find Oling. Oling, no idea that Kings is behind him. Instead, I think he's looking for a player up northern. Gets one kill. Oling actually is going to be the player to wrap back through. Second kill, pretty good for Kings. And albeit this is a little bit individual for OUG, it is still that play that makes everything happen. Players now coming off the spawn are able to successfully clear through red because of this little three-piece play. And you go down to a 6v6, you get into the late round, and this is where Q9 really start to panic a little bit, because what was going so well for them, which is trying to get control of red and, you know, moving forward through these kind of lanes, that is no longer possible because Kings now has full control over here. So one last little push hit from Q9, and now we once again start to refer back to what we call the late round investments that OUG do so well here in this matchup versus Q9. We're going to see Cartels pull out his Tempest, and the Death Machine also come out from Solo, who, by the way, plays his life stupendously well considering how weak he is here in this moment. He just backs all the way off towards Ticket and just plays his life perfectly. Flanking play from Cartels, though. Perfect route. Finds 3. Solo also now just trying to push pressure on for the last couple of players. They have absolutely nowhere to go. And that is how that round ends. Perfect little late round investment from OUG. And so that's OUG winning the control. All right, so really I think there's three things that you want to take away from that map. Obviously there's a lot of complexities to it, but the basic things that might necessarily change as you get into the matches versus Wolves and the later match versus Q9 is that, well, first and foremost, that northern side of the map control that we were talking about quite significantly. You talk about, you know, red and control tower, areas of the map that OUG pretty much consistently have control of, whether you're on the offense or on the defense, and are constantly running routes through. If you don't have control of those areas of the map, well, OUG have a significantly tougher time of winning takeoff control. Secondly is their early game breakoffs, specifically Tectonic with the War Machine on the defense, basically preventing any players from actually getting into control tower, which is a big reason why point number 1 even works in the first instance, and then the follow-up kills from that. Their breakoffs are great versus Q9 the first time of the round. And the third and final thing is something that is very situational, but something that still very much appears in that first match versus Q9, which is late round operators coming out from OUG, be it solo with the DM or the Tempest coming out from cartels. You know, certain plays like that really can split the difference when you're even on lives in the late round, and they are very much what made the difference for OUG in some of those intense clutch situations. So with that in mind then, let's now take a look over at their second match. This time, it's a match that they lost versus Wolves. Alright guys, now it's time to take a look at the second match, this one between OUG and Wolves. And I'm going to show you guys what changes Wolves will have made on VOD, watching OUG versus Q9 into their matchup in Stage 3. Now, first and foremost, it's important to note that we talk about one of the reasons that OUG was so successful versus Q9 was that they managed to take control of, again, the control tower and of red. These two power positions give them a lot of map control, and Q9 didn't really do anything about it. They were unable to stop OUG from doing that. One of the things you're going to be seeing here is Wolves kind of altering their break off a little bit so that the vast majority of their early round control is centered into making sure that they do get control of those power positions. So for them, we're going to be seeing breakoffs all the way like through here. Basically, the vast majority of their map control is ensuring that OUG do not get any of this area of the map. Making sure that doesn't happen is everything for Wolves. And that's why you're seeing them on the breakoff here. If I start this video, send 4 players either through red or through the middle of the map to stop OUG from getting these key power positions. Now, it's worth saying that things here are a little bit mixy. It is not by any means a clean start for either of these two teams. There is still a lot of battles. As a matter of fact, actually, as we fast forward a little bit here, you're going to see Kings kind of make a flanking play and pick up 3 players through red. However, off the back of that, it's what Wolves do then off the back of kind of that initial flurry of gunfights that is crucial. So once again, you'll see these players spawn up in red side, and they're not trying to get mid-map control. Like you're not seeing, you know, this almost immediate kind of funnel in towards B, even though you've lost players. They know that the most important thing they can possibly do is continue to hold on towards red. And that is more or less exactly what Wolves do. So as we get further and further into the round, they removed Kings from red. Actually, to be fair, there is a couple of crucial gunfights going down by red that if Wolves don't win, more likely than not, OUG do end up winning this round. But we see this play here from Rise. So Rise off the spawn, almost immediately, spawns up here and jumps straight on towards the balcony with a Tundra. Now, this is something you never really see on Crossfire Control, or on Takeoff Control, excuse me. It's something that you only ever really see on Crossfire Control. And this unique play is something that OUG aren't really going to have prepared for. And it's something that works out so damn well for Rise, because he picks off 3 players through the middle of the map and completely shuts everything down. So first of all, he helps their team out by B, basically creates a 2 versus 1 on B. Secondly, he then alleviates pressure towards control tower. So something really important to do here is this one position for Rise effectively gives them control over B and gives them control over the control tower. Early round control is basically all down to this 1-3 piece coming through from Rise. Here's the second kill. Here's the third kill. And yeah, they'll continue to spawn up in control tower, but this now enables them to push forward off of these kills and get some more map control. Again, these are awful arrows. You don't need to worry about the arrows. So moving a little later on into the round then, OUG do not have any northern side control. But what they do have control of is, if I get the pen out, the launch center. And that enables them to push a little bit at least further up the map, and it gets Tech to his kind of iconic position of being on the objective on A before they actually have any map control to capture the point itself. It's how OUG have been successful. Again, another point versus Q9 is that they're willing to jump on the objective before necessarily they have the map control to actually fully close out the point. The problem is, Wolves, they have a good counter to that. They have players for themselves push forward into key power positions. Notably, again, Rise is still up top on the balcony, and you've got Wind and Sound, or Peg, excuse me, over here. Now, Peg makes the first move here in this moment. He pushes all the way through and kind of almost immediately gets shut down. But you see Rise make a little bit of a key wrap that I don't think Tech necessarily expects. So you're seeing it here, kind of goes all the way through towards the open door. Now, he's basically reliant on the fact that Wind over here is watching this entire area. So nobody's going to be trying to take him out through the door. He can basically fully watch Tech on this crossfire. This is a lot of arrows on the map, but you get the idea that basically him going here is going to be able to watch this entire cross through because this area is also being watched by his teammate. And you're going to see that here. So shutdown comes through. Player in Peg does get taken out of the play. OUG now move up the map just a little bit. And this is where that snipe comes through from Rise. So he immediately tries to take one player out through control center, and it doesn't work. But then he realizes, okay, now I can try and take a player down on the point. Exactly what he does. So here's the first play coming through. Now, another important thing to note here is off the spawn, even though Peg has already died, he's almost immediately filled a gap where Rise was watching previously in making sure that the middle of the map is being watched. And so you have this, again, this trifecta of players set up for this crossfire. You do have, I believe it is, Wind over here around the back line. You've got Rise watching the flank, and you've got Peg through the middle of the map. And in doing so, basically, the first shot comes out from Rise, takes Tech down. Almost immediately, he will reposition to try and help out his teammate because Wind is involved in the gunfight versus Solo. At the same time, you once again now have Peg coming through to try and deal with any extra players that might be involved in the play, and he takes Kings down. This effectively creates a 2 versus 1, where now this little reposition from Rise removes Solo from the play, and with that little crossfire, OUG's attempt to get control of A early completely falls apart. Alright, so looking a little bit later into the round then, you do see now, because of the fact that OUG don't have any topside control, they're effectively forced to move down towards the launch center. That's really the only path they can possibly take, and that's what Cartels does manage to do to get behind enemy lines. They also do try to send a couple of players through control tower, but it's all very individual, and none of it really works, as you can see here. So Cartels does get behind enemy lines. Almost immediately that gets picked up by Rise, who does take him down. And then as far as the players that do manage to make their way through control tower are concerned, Wind then takes Tectonic and then Kings out of the equation. So almost immediately, all of these players going down forces the rest of OUG off spawn. Okay, I mean, at this point, if you're OUG, you know that this area of the map, again, control tower is basically blocked off. You can't do anything. Mid-map is being watched as well. And so there's only really one way feasibly that OUG can go. And again, it's through launch center. Wolves, they react to this. They know exactly what they're doing in the closing moments here. So all they do is they just keep an eye on all of the exits. So you have, players, for example, like Zai making their way over here. Rise is making sure he's watching the cut as well. Late investment of the Tempest is something that OUG did very well in their game versus Q9. And here you're seeing Wolves do it in round number 1. Just every single exit is being watched. Look at the setup here for Wolves. Again, you've got Peg keeping an eye. If I go to the other one here, if you've got Peg keeping an eye on this door, you've got Zai keeping an eye on this door, Sound keeping an eye on scaffolding. If anyone wants to try and get through control tower, it's being watched by Wind. Basically, every single point of entry towards B or even towards A is totally blocked off. There's only 60 seconds left. There's just nothing that OUG can do in this instance because they've got 0 map control. So that's the end of the round. You can see all of those kills coming through from Wolves. The map control that they obtained over the entirety of the northern side of the map there. Just no control whatsoever for OUG. They can't do anything. Alright, so let's get into round number 2 then, and again, this is now OUG on defense. As you saw in the Q9 section of this video, you already kind of know more or less how this setup works. I'm actually going to zoom into the minimap for you guys this time, which I've just figured out that I can do. We're going to do it anyway. Alright, so If you weren't familiar, again, if you need a reminder, effectively the idea is you're going to have Tech off start because he currently has the war machine ready to go, pushing through this angle here. The idea is you want to land some of these shots around here to make sure that no players can get through the control tower. This is that big power position that you want to force the spawns as far back as humanly possible and to get the entire northern side of the map control. Now, of course, while you do that, you also send Kings and Cartel all the way around so that if any players do get through, well, there's people there ready for them. That's the setup, and that's what worked so well against Q9. However, unfortunately for them, it doesn't work out in the same way whatsoever. So we'll show you guys that setup. So you're seeing here again, Tech is sending those shots. But the difference this time is that they invest 2 or 3, I think it is, trophy systems into stopping all of it going through. And that enables effectively those 3 players to get not just through control side, but also players to get through the middle of the map. Now, in this instance, again, this is something that Kings and Cartels have struggled before. You are very unlikely, especially when you aren't using operators, to win a 2 versus 3 on that side of the map. And unfortunately, OUG just do not win the fight. Kings will get a double, comes down to a 1 versus 1, but he recognizes, hey, best thing I can do in this instance is just push all the way back to red, make sure we do not at least immediately lose that control. But on that offensive start for Wolves, they immediately make that adaptation. It's such a simple thing, but bringing those trophy systems down around here just allows you so much more space to get into control center, and that's, or control tower, excuse me, and that's something that Q9 were not doing versus OUG, and it's absolutely a play made off of VOD. Okay then, so off the back of that initial push from Wolves, let's talk about what they do with the map control. So again, remember, here, they want the control center control for the entire time. What they don't want is they don't want OUG to get full control over this northern side of the map, because that's where they were successful previously when it came to their matchup versus Q9. So if I go to the full screen here, something I'm going to point out is that currently OUG, they have this red spawn. Nobody is pushing in from Wolves, and that is totally intentional. They currently want OUG to spawn here because the game plan for Wolves is very simple. So for OUG in spawning here, they've got a couple of different directions, really a few different directions they can go. They could, if they so desired, spend a long time flanking all the way through B to try and get some modicum of control and alleviate some pressure here through the launch center. Instead, though, what they're going to do is they're going to push either out through ticket side, through the middle of the map, or basically even towards control tower to regain this northern and the middle side of the map. And the reason they're going to do this is because what Wolves do is to continually apply this pressure through the middle of the map. They want to try and pull OUG here instead of making this one long flanking play. And I'll show you very quickly, basically what Wolves are doing here. Every single time they spawn up, they're going in one of 3 directions. They're either going through the control tower to make sure they don't lose that power position. They're either going into the middle of the map to continue to apply pressure to the point to make sure that OUG do continue to hit this over and over again. Or perhaps they're going through the top side of launch center, through scaffolding. And the reason for that, very simply, is that as player number 1 in Zai is doing right now, it provides a bit of overwatch up top. It allows you to go in a couple of different directions. If you do lose a player in the middle of the map, you can go to replace that player in the middle of the map. You can also push through the ticket if you want as well. And again, all of this just to say, it's all about applying pressure through the middle of the map so that OUG do not take that long flank through that would technically blow this entire play up, because they don't have the time to do that. They can't afford to spend that time doing it. So with that said, let's take a look then at how this plays out. So again, you can start to see some of these kills going Wolves' way initially. Now, another thing I do want to point out here, it's a very minor thing, but it does matter in the grand scheme of things. Cartel pulls his Tempest out and only finds 1 kill with it. If he gets a little bit more, maybe value with that Tempest, things could look entirely different. But I will say, on the whole, that this setup isn't actually probably perfect from Wolves. They have to kind of take a couple of waves of gunfights, and after that, OUG do string 3 kills together, back to back, and actually alleviate a lot of the pressure through the middle of the map down to Cartels, Kings, and Tectonics. That's 3 individual 1v1s that you've won. OUG, off the back of this, if I go to the minimap real quick here, are now going to do exactly what they want to do. They're going to try and get control center control. They're going to push through the middle of the map. Basically, they've got full map control once again with 1 minute 30 on the clock. Now, something I do want to point out here as well is keep an eye on player number 3. We'll put a pin in it here for the moment. Player number 3 is currently sat in the middle of the map. Now, when you lose Zai in this passage of play, Wind is the only player still up in this instance. And he has a couple of different things he can do. If I just press play real quick, obviously you're going to see Zai go down. Zai actually pulls back, but never mind. Doesn't make a difference. The point is, Wind, you can see if I just get rid of all the arrows real quick, Wind is currently here. He doesn't push through to deal with the players that have got to the control tower. He doesn't push through to the players that got ticket. He decides to take kind of route perfect through the middle. Now, there is a bit of timing. Obviously, he's very lucky that nobody pushes him through this mid-cut off the spawn, but still, he chooses the perfect route. And we'll put a pin on that in just a second and come back to Wind, because what he does on the minimap is very, very important. Okay. So now we look at the gunfights coming off the spawn, and we start to see them push through the middle of the map. Now, we'll put a pause here again. Already talked about the fact that on the mini-map here, you can see that the players here up top have pushed into control tower. There's also a hunter-killer drone in the air. But this is kind of the positioning that both teams want to get control of. And currently, OUG are in a 2v1 around there. It's very unlikely that Peg's going to be able to pull off a 1 versus 2 in that situation. So pulling some attention away from those players is the best possible thing that you can do. Now, I will say those players in the 2v1, they get kind of unfortunate, because through the middle of the map, Sound ends up winning this fight versus Wrath. And what you're now going to see Tech do is you're going to see him pull all the way back towards the middle of the map. And that's going to mean that now it's gone from a 2v1 over here in control tower to a 1v2. And you're going to lose both of those fights. So Tech gets wiped out. Peg wins his 1 versus 1 quite easily. And now all of a sudden, you have mid-map control off the back of those 3 kills. However, the situation is now worse than it was previously, because previously Wolves were just dealing with OUG players continually spawning inside red. You're winning the live situation. That's why you now have this 22 versus 16. But you didn't really have much in the way of map control. Well, you didn't have much in the way of map control until we're going to go back to that route that I was talking about that Wind makes. So just to show you guys exactly what he's going to do, I'm going to go to the minimap. He takes this absolutely perfect route through. So he goes straight through the middle of the map. Number 2 goes down. And he goes all the way behind red. Now, we already discussed the fact that OUG's red spawns weren't getting blocked. They were going to continue to spawn there pretty much no matter what, and being able to continue to get control tower over and over again. Wind plugging this gap and effectively saying, hey, red is mine now, means that now OUG are not going to spawn off the back of that loss of gunfights. They're not going to spawn here anymore. They're going to spawn over by B. They're maybe going to spawn here if they get kind of a rogue spawn through the middle of the map, but they're certainly no longer going to be spawning inside red. And that's going to totally change the map control for OUG. So if we go big screen, we can kind of now zoom forward to everything after those gunfights. And you can see now that they are spawning inside around B, they've only really got one place they could feasibly go, which is to try and retake launch center control, either via directly hitting through B or through ticket. Unfortunately, all 3 players decide to do the exact same thing in this instance, which is to hit the exact same route. They triple stack through. And this is one of the biggest plays of the entire map. Zai is just sitting here waiting, finds all 3 kills, and absolutely decimates them. And at this point, the round is basically done. Like, A is about to be captured. You're in a 9-life differential. But to add insult to injury, Wolves almost immediately start just really drilling this one home. You get a 2-piece coming through from this Predator missile. You've got 3 ops ready to go. This round at this point is totally unrecoverable. It doesn't matter what you do. And OUG really do, I think, start to panic in this instance. And I don't think there's really much you can do. They tried to clear out space, but a 20v8 is more often than not going to be unrecoverable. Like, you're never rarely going to see it. You're never going to see it. You're never going to see it like that being a recoverable situation. And that's what you see here for OUG, is they just absolutely can't do anything. They are trading at this point, but the life differential is just a little bit too much to handle. And at this point, if I just fast forward, the round is done. So 13v1, Tech is done. Now, at the very least, they didn't capture B, but that little passage of play there from Wolves, if we go back to the very beginning of the round where they basically got the break off, that is a pretty much perfect round of control from Wolves. Now, obviously, they got a little lucky. Zai picking up that 3 with a perfect prediction, that definitely helps them in that instance. But in terms of, manipulating the spawns, manipulating the map control from Wolves in that round, that is a pretty much perfect read of everything that they would have gotten off of the VOD from Q9. Okay, so as we get into round number 3 then, things become a little bit kind of messier here. This is a very mixy start to this round. It's a very back and forth affair, and when the objective at this point, I think for you guys at least, is very clear for both Wolves and for OUG. OUG are going to continue to hit that top side of the map over and over again, and for Wolves, they are just not going to let control of red go away. That's why I've got that giant X there. I did that from a previous take or whatever. So yeah, so red control is going to continue to sit there for Wolves. And actually the wild thing about this round is, through all of the very close early start to this round for both OUG and Wolves, it isn't until there's about 30 to 40 seconds on the clock that OUG actually get control. And to show you guys that, I'm going to give you a little fast forward through this round to the time when there is about 40 seconds on the clock or so, and the only way they actually get it is because of a play from Tech. So you can see 35 seconds here. Cartels is also finally in towards red. He picks up, or he should try to get the kill against Rise. So I don't even know if he actually gets it or not. Yeah, he does. Gets the second kill against Win. Tech comes in for that kill. Nice little 2-on-1. 2v1 comes through, and then of course finally Sound gets shut down through the middle of the map. And as far as this offensive round goes, that is the best look that OUG actually have here, because they finally have done what they've been successful at in the past, which is to get red control. They've got control center. Basically, this entire northern portion of the map is finally theirs. But the reaction from Wolves is absolutely stellar. I really love this reaction from Wolves. So what you're going to see Wolves do now is they're like, cool, we don't have red control anymore. And it would be kind of foolish to invest lives in an 11 versus 10 into trying to re-get control of red. So why don't we just leave that part of the map alone? Maybe we'll send a couple of players to blow this up. But for the most part, our focus now is just going to be making sure that we reinforce Control Center and Ticket to make sure that OUG are forced to funnel through red, because that is a more favorable fight for us. And that is more or less exactly what happens. If you kind of fast forward here, OUG, they do get control. A goes, and an extra 60 seconds gets added to the board. And we're seeing that now with the kind of positioning that you're seeing players have. Peg is going to get this kill against Cartels, and it is basically full launch center control. This area is, if I go to big minimap for you guys, this area is fully locked off. Like, you are not getting into this if you're OUG, and this plan now is starting to come together where the only possible way for them to funnel through is to get through red. Now, there is a tiny bit of horrible Call of Duty timing that is about to take place, and you guys might need to shield your eyes for this one. Now, if you're watching the match, you'll remember us reacting to this at the time. It is genuinely horrendous. So keep an eye on player number 3. That is Wind. He has already revealed his position. You can see player number 4 in solo is currently shooting at him, and he backs off ever so slightly, but he recognizes that, hey, OUG are all going to be coming from this one lane. He makes the literal perfect push through, and they just do not expect it whatsoever. So OUG, they get a couple of players through. I believe it's Solo and Tectonic that do get through behind enemy lines. Solo makes his position known, and then this wrap is made from Wind. If I show you guys, sorry, I'm messing about with the tool. This wrap right here is made from Wind. It's a bit of a blurry minimap, but you can see here, basically, just little wrap through. Absolutely nobody is watching this lane whatsoever. There should be someone here, but they're all kind of bunched up in towards red. Nobody is preoccupied with the potential flank, and this play just blows it all up. Totally no way for them to recover after this. So just to show you at big screen, the exact play from Wind. He makes the wrap happen. Nobody watching the flank. Tech for free, Solo down as well, and that's going to be the double that blows it up. Off the back of that now, you're going to continue to see Wolves push over and over again. Now you're going to see Peg push through towards Launch Center as well. And albeit OUG aren't totally wrecked by it, it's just the amount of space that kind of play affords you. What would have been a mountain threat through red just totally dissipates off the back of one singular play from Wind. And OUG just never really recover through the remainder of this round. They just don't have the lives. Constant flanks. Peg's still here, by the way, as well. Peg's still chilling around the launch center. There is just nothing that OUG can do. So a bit of COD time in there. Really unfortunate for OUG, but they do end up losing this round. But overall, again, you've got to give Wolves a lot of props because they don't let OUG have any red control, which is paramount to OUG's success on this map until very late into the round. And even when they do, they have a very clear response to it. Okay, let's talk about the fourth and final round then, and let's start by talking about the break-off. Now, as far as the break-off for this final round is concerned, this is actually not a bad start to this round for OUG whatsoever. So we go big map here for a second. You're going to see the normal kind of battle that you get at the start of every round for Tech with his overclocked war machine and those trophy systems to make sure that Wolves can get into control tower. However, the break-off for Wolves, excuse me, is a little bit different this time around. So previously they've been sending all of their forces through control tower in a 3v2 because they know that Kings and Cartels are going to be here, and that's their best chance at maintaining early map control. However, this time around, they're going to send one player on a flank with the Death Machine to deal with Kings and Cartels early on, and also simultaneously get a lot of mid-map presence. And that is a great plan for Wolves off the start. And you can see that for the most part, it does at the very least work out for kind of what the idea of what they want to do actually is. Tech's war machine doesn't do anything. Kings and Cartels are in that position. However, what they don't account for is actually a small change in pace from Raf off the start of this control. So instead of kind of going towards the lower side, going towards Ticket, Raf hits the straight up middle of the map. He's now involved in this play, and him being here allows him to back up Kings and Cartels through the route that he takes, helping out the team. Instead of this being like a 2 versus 3 for Kings and Cartels, it's now a 3 versus 3, and Raf's little two-piece in the ensemble of kills actually wins the engagements early on so that OUG can take mid-map pressure off the rip. I'll show you guys that here. Here's that Death Machine pull coming out. 1 kill through. Raf doubles up, finds those 2 kills, and now you have a lot more pressure through the top side than you otherwise would if you're OUG because of Raf making that small play. Okay, so fast forwarding a little bit here then, OUG won their break-off fights, but Wolves are still fighting back, and you end up losing Raf, you can see that in the feed here, around that top control side, but you still have a little bit of presence. However, we're going to talk about the flanking play once again, the route that is taken by one player on Wolves. We'll go big mini-map here to show you guys what I'm talking about, so you can see it very blurry. Player number 2 is that guy, and player number 2 is going to do exactly what Win was doing in that previous round on the offense, where they're basically able to get this topside control with the route straight through the middle of the map. This forces OUG to spawn somewhere down here and makes any attempt to get mid-map control significantly more difficult than it otherwise would be if you were spawning here instead. So you can see that almost off the rip here. If I go to full screen, you can see that that little push is very important. But obviously on its own, in isolation, it wouldn't be that good. Instead, this is where those mid-round operators come out from Wolves to great effect. So first and foremost, you're going to have Zai pull out his Annihilator. He needs to take out Solo on the other side of this wall. Needs to take out Solo to get this top positioning, because as we've already said, if we go to the mini-map here for a second, if I get rid of all that getting this top area is so important for mid-map control because of your ability to both overwatch and potentially fill space if you need to. So going back to the big screen, you can see this kill goes down. Solo down for the count, and now all of a sudden you've got that top control. You also pick Takeoff in the moment, and you get the slide down for the third. I don't even know if that kill went his way, but it didn't. Now, the best part about this play from Zai is he doesn't just get that topside control. We talked about him potentially filling space right through the top window. Well, that's exactly what he does. He doesn't just sit there and wait for his teammates. He almost immediately pushes through to Ticket to create space. And these players coming off the spawn, they need to deal with Zai before anything. So it buys time for his team as well as picks up a lot of map presence. All this, by the way, while we still have Peg in the position around red, blocking those red spawns and ensuring that OUG are spawning here. So going back to it, Zai finding more value, another kill for him. Now it's time for another one, because OUG, you saw those players off the spawn who had already gotten through still around control center. So you're going to need to take those players down. And then we see another investment coming out, this time from Wind, with the Sparrow finding 1 kill, gets the second, and all of a sudden now you're back to the exact same situation that we were in before. Well, we have Wolves, you've got all of this mid-map presence again. If I go to the big map for you guys, again, it's that exact same position that worked out for Wolves so well before, where you've got the red control to force OUG to spawn all the way towards B. You now have this control center control as well. Of course, there is this little top window which you can watch over the middle of the map, and you've got one player, this time Zai with the annihilator, in towards launch control. The point being, you've got players in the perfect positions to put OUG in the exact same position that messed them up previously. Now, from this point onwards, this all becomes a bit of a trading game, right? You've got just over a minute left on the clock. Kings will get a nice double, but at this point, for OUG, there isn't really much you can do. Things become a bit individual for them, and they just start losing the trades to a massive extent. They're constantly getting flanked. Any flanks they want to put together like that from Tectonic just completely fall apart, and you're left in a 10 versus 3. Now, there is a couple of last-minute kind of last-ditch effort plays coming out from OUG here, like they'll pull the DM out from solo. Tech will get the War Machine in the closing moments of this round as well, which obviously, if there were to be a round 5, would be safe for that, but yeah. Not good whatsoever for OUG. We'll just watch the closing moments of this control for you guys. Solo gets a couple of kills. Rise is there, ready for anybody to push out past their station, shall we say. And there's just nothing you can do. And that's the thing as well, I kind of mentioned it there, is that Solo, his DM, isn't going to last this entire time. There's enough time that they can just possibly wait this out and win it on lives. Rise picks him up with the Tempest. Tech brings his War Machine out to try and salvage this round, and at this point, the round is just done. There is nothing you can feasibly do, and there is those final kills and the 4-0. Okay, so with that then, Wolves very clearly outplayed OUG, but what did they learn from the previous match against Q9? Why were they able to take the first Takeoff control away from OUG the entire season and do it in such indomitable fashion? Well, let's revisit some of those points that we were talking about against Q9. So first and foremost, we talk about the War Machine break-off off the start of those rounds from OUG. Albeit some of those rounds were perfectly fine, you could see that double trophy system setup. It was such a simple adjustment for them to make, but what would have been an easier start to the rounds for OUG became significantly more complex when Tech's War Machine wasn't finding as much value at the start of the rounds as it had been previously. Then you go into pure positioning on the map. Wolves' entire presence, both on offense and on defense, was to make sure that they consistently held the north side of the map, something that Q9 were not able to do pretty much constantly. We saw route plays being made by individual players on Wolves, especially on offense, to make sure that OUG spawned as far back as humanly possible and so that they could get that red control. They constantly pushed Kings and Cartels out of the break-off to make sure that they were the ones in control of Control Tower off the rip. And then, of course, you get towards later in the round, and when you get control of those power positions, it really felt like OUG, if they did finally figure out how to react by sending players through the launch center, those players would get red very easily. All of this to say that Wolves absolutely did their homework. Nothing that OUG did in that control could work out. Great for them. And that was all down to adaptations that Wolves had made. Now, we'll also say as well, to be fair, there is a small asterisk in this, in that Raph was having connection issues. I do need to add this in here. You can see that throughout the game. If you're watching it, you can see that, it says in Mandarin or whatever that Raph is disconnecting and reconnecting to the game. So OUG were playing at a disadvantage, but it quite clearly affected them. And it's also then worth saying that Q9 were able to beat them in much the same way in the very next matchup. So clearly, I think the point is that both Wolves and Q9, they made their adaptations to what OUG had been doing on Takeoff control. And this is, by the way, folks, the perfect example of a team looking at VOD and making adjustments for your matches off the back of it. And with that, that's going to do it for today's video. If you liked what you saw today, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel for more things Call of Duty Mobile Esports. I want to hear feedback about this video in the comments section below, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, and what you'd like to see in future analysis pieces on the channel. So make sure you drop your feedback down below in the comments. I'd absolutely love to hear it. And of course, if you want me to take a look at any particular match of Call of Duty Mobile over the last few weeks, drop that in the comments as well, and I'll be taking a look. Just to let you guys know as well, CDM is starting tomorrow. We're going to have our watch parties live every single day for the next 4 days for CDM playoffs as the final 3 teams make it to champs. I cannot wait to see you qualifiers, and I can't wait to watch it all with you. So make sure you're staying tuned on this channel for that as well. As I said, guys, this is going to do it for this video. So thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, to catch you guys in the next one.